Welcome back to Munro Live, and today we are in Detroit, we are in a warehouse, and we are looking at three-dimensional solar panels, curved solar panels. So now, normally you would not want a curved solar panel on your roof, so what would be a practical application of this? Well, on a car. Look at that. Sono Motors, their Sono Sion. But of course, this is a concept. Well, no, it's not a concept. It is a real vehicle, and it's right there. So, Thomas, this Sion, this is still a prototype, but it's a prototype that's pretty far along, correct?
It's very far along. We call it a series validation vehicles. It's vehicle number 10 out of a fleet of 40 series validation vehicles and body in whites.
All right, so these are almost 40 vehicles that they have built to almost completion to go through their validation testing. You would do this prior to doing any pre-series launch on production tools with production equipment. Now, okay, so is this just a solar-powered individual car, or how much application does your company see integrating solar into vehicles?
Let's start with our founders. Their vision is a world without fossil fuels. In order to achieve that, you needed to get a lot of electric vehicles out. And price, range, and infrastructure is even today an issue about electric vehicles. So the range and infrastructure issue, where do I charge my vehicle, was actually the core driver for the solar technology, where we are unique with integrating it all around the car, 360 degrees, and not under glass, which is so far state-of-the-art technology. But our 30 patents are held mainly for integrating solar wafers into polymer.
Okay. So you have this vehicle, and you're also working with partners trying to get this technology into fleet vehicles, trucks, buses, and you have some of those actually on the road right now, correct?
Yes. The Sion being, of course, the first of many vehicles we plan to build on that platform is, of course, dear to my heart, but I have to admit, we have not delivered the first Sion yet. We have to wait until the second half of next year. But we already have buses running with our solar solution since last year. We have a bus in Munich that runs our headquarters regularly that takes solar with our solution of maximum power point tracker, electronic control unit technology into a 12 volt, 24 volt battery today.
So the reason why I bring that up is there's a common criticism. Whenever we show something and say it's a prototype, it's still someone's imagination or it's still someone's science experiment. The reason why I want to bring that up and the fact that you're working with multiple partners, this concept, this vehicle, this company has momentum behind it. You have multiple people working towards that direction. Now they all have their own goals, but yet this is a common thread between those companies. So I just want to mention that just to say this is more real than some things that we have seen in the past. We get excited about technology. We want to see that technology come to fruition, come into the market. A lot of them just fall apart though. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be wildly successful. I hope you are. I'm certain you hope you are. But when I look at what is behind it and where it is going,
yes,
I have a little bit more confidence that something would be real.
Thank you for the faith. I would love to add one item. And from the engineering side, it sounds like so obvious, but the main reason a young company fails is because there's no market out there for their product. This question for us is answered. We have 20,000 customers that made a down payment of an average of 2,000 euros for the car. Now we actually have to deliver from an engineering side.
All right, so let's get a closer look at the
Yes.
car. And I want to show the solar cells, then I'm going to talk about criticism. So you'll see the solar cells integrated into the panel. And there are many panels throughout this vehicle that all have these solar cells integrated in.
456.
456 in total today. Okay. So, criticism. Someone's going to say, you're in Detroit, you're in October, you're not going to be making power then. True. I'm in a narrow city and I have tall buildings on each side. I don't get as much power then. True. But what you were saying, the fact that maybe our infrastructure is not built up enough now so that we can do 100% of the charge for the vehicle. But from your calculations, you can take about a third or maybe even more. So all of those instances when you are charging your vehicle off of solar, you can cut a third of that cost, a third of that use of the normal infrastructure. That makes it worth it in itself. You don't have to be a 100% solar car 100% of the time. I drive a huge amount of miles, so I could not begin to apply this to me, but if I think of how much money I pay in energy to drive back and forth, if I could just take a third of that, oh yeah, that makes it worth it in itself. It doesn't have to be 100%. Your vehicle does not have to be 100% solar, and it can still be a success. Would I say that correctly?
Yes, but I would like to add.
Okay.
First, yes. First of all, it's a regular electric vehicle, right? You can charge it level 1, level 2. You can charge it, fast charge it, 75 kilowatts. So for your trips, there's still a fast charging capability. You don't have to wait until the sun starts to rise, right? And then it's bidirectional. We can get 3.7 kilowatts out or even 11 kilowatts out AC. But coming back to the person who lives in Detroit, what is shocking for me as a German, we calculated that vehicle for the European market, giving you 10 miles with average German weather range. That's exactly the distance that the average German commuter drives in metropolitan areas. Meaning that between March and September, you might very well never have to plug in your car at all, if it's your average commuter and you're doing some drive on the side. And that's with average German weather. So that's 3,500 miles. I shocked to realize that Germany, even in the south, is still far north of the US. So we calculated for Detroit, average weather, you leave the car outside, you drive it outside, not in a garage and not between two sky rises, yes, but then you get 4,700 miles of range. So as you point out, it might be more than 30%, maybe it's half what you're driving. With a commuter, it might be all you're commuting to drive. So yes, it gives you independence and more an autark life.
So I showed you those solar cells that are embedded into the panel. The unique thing about this panel is, as you said, it's not under glass. This is inside of an injection mold. I asked him about the process of building this up, and it is a total of 7 layers built into this to make it work. But making this work inside injection molding is very unique. And I've talked with other people that have wanted to go this route, thinking that there are already suppliers that can do it, and all they have to do is get with those suppliers to make their panels for them. That's not true, correct?
No.
So what did you have to do to make solar cells inside of an injection mold?
This was a big challenge, and we think we cracked it. But to be clear, here we only have an injection mold in the back. In the front, we have a very sturdy layer and layers of polymer and other materials to make sure that it's very resistant. But also I have to point out to you that while 90% of the car's parts are standard, ready for series production, this is our 7th generation of integrating of solar parts, and we still wait 1 or 2 more generations before we launch the product. There are some areas that me as an automotive guy would like to improve. The waviness of the material is still not to my typical automotive standard. While I would argue that with this car, that's only available in one color and one version, very well equipped, this is the Swiss pocket knife and not the Gucci handbag of automotive. So I think a lot of our customers wouldn't care too much, but probably you and I and your viewers might.
Okay, so that's a criticism that I get sometimes from some of the people that watch, and honestly I have to say that this is a criticism that other people tell me. I don't watch any of the Munro Live videos and I don't read the comments, but in saying that, some of the viewers will say, why are you picking on what that corner did or what that color was or how something felt? What's important is the battery. What's important is the drivetrain. For some people, that is the most important thing. Others, it's not. You're still building a complete vehicle, and you have to have a complete vehicle that is built well enough for the consumer that is going to be purchasing it. So as he said about the waviness, if you look across this panel, you will see how the light gets broken. There are several different areas that are valleys. That is shrink in the process. So they have multiple layers that are built up at multiple times. Temperatures being applied to that panel in different ways at different times. It is then back injected with the back layer. That is applying more temperature, more heat into the system. Whenever you have any type of a polymer, any type of a plastic panel, you have to worry about shrink and warpage that happens during the process. So this is still an early prototype. You've built 37, 40 of these. So I would not expect you to have your process dialed in yet. So we can see here the different temperatures and the different shrink and the different warpage that are happening across these vehicles. It is apparent, but it can be worked on in processing and manufacturing. You're just not to that stage yet. So we have quite a few people looking right now, but let's kind of walk around the vehicle and talk a little bit more about your decisions that you made, having a common vehicle, and by having solar, the shape that this vehicle takes on.
Yeah.
It's boxy. Look at that. Who's going to say that that's attractive at all?
I do, because as I said earlier, form follows function.
Yeah.
And for us, function is important. But of course, good looks are important as well. But if you expect a sports car, well, mostly the sun is not shining from the top, but from the side. So be careful when people talk about max charging capability of their solar equipments. On a good day, in the summer, our roof delivers 60% of what we need. In a bad day, in the winter, our roof delivers 20%. So we still yield less in the winter, the days are shorter, the angle is worse, but you need 360 degrees around the car if you want to harvest the whole year. If for the first affordable solar electric vehicle, you want to have a real benefit for the customer and not just a gadget that you can brag about when you meet in the club, right?
So let's look at one of these body lines. We see this line right here going through the vehicle.
That has a
Your
function.
Door handle is below that.
Yeah.
So you have this huge dead space. You would think, all right, normally you'd have the door up high, the handle up high. But this would be prime area with this angle for sun.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it was a conscious decision to put this below this body line so that you can get maximum amount.
I'm
sunlight.
5'7". I have to admit, I'm okay with it. The car itself is a C-segment compact car, length and the width of a Nissan Leaf or a Volkswagen ID.3, but the height is significantly higher. So I'm not particularly short, but I think it's a convenient spot. Honestly, this would be too high for me.
Yeah.
So I disagree with that.
Okay,
But
for reasoning.
Yes, for reasoning. But in general, your point is very valid, because this thing takes away solar space. So if you see here, the half cells, we had to give up one half cell here for the area. We could have given up a half cell here. But I'd like to point out the functionality of it. When you have solar on a roof, usually you go in one direction or in two or in three. And for these directions, you have your own line, maximum power point tracker logic that allows your solar cell to switch the power through to whatever receiver you have. And the regular solar stuff doesn't work for us because we have different orientations. And the car moves fast because it's charging also while you drive. So we needed a very fast switching maximum power point tracker that we developed ourselves. The first one I want to point out is ours has 8 channels. Mm-hmm. And one channel here is this whole area, from here to here to here to here. That is one orientation of the solar cells, and for them, the light is always the same.
For the interior of this vehicle, it is very basic decisions, very, very simple design.
Okay.
But in accomplishing this, rather than just the interior covering, but talking about the components, your steering column, your infotainment, all of the different things that an OEM normally would have to develop,
Yes.
would have to source,
Yes.
you were able to find suppliers and partners to help cover a lot of those components
Yes.
as well. Now, one of your main suppliers, I do believe, is Continental. Is that true?
One of them, for example, our electric drive unit comes from Vitesco, formerly Continental, and now I think Continental has stake in them. Tires are coming from Continental, some electronic control units. So they're one of our major suppliers, yes.
So in saying that, I'm going back to the point to where, what do you have to do to make your vehicle real? Now, some of the startups that I've worked with have sourced components from other suppliers to build their prototypes. But those suppliers are not capable of selling those components for production. Sometimes you have contract disputes because a lot of times the supplier, when they design a steering column, they're going to design it for a customer for a vehicle. So that OEM, if that was Mercedes, GM, Ford, they would actually own the tooling. And they could say, no, you're not selling the part that we paid for to some other company. But you've actually worked out, for a lot of components, production sourcing with these suppliers, correct?
Yes.
So that helps you make this real.
Yeah.
It takes some of the work off of your end for designing. All you're doing now is integrating into your vehicle. That's very helpful.
You could say our strategy from the beginning was a carryover parts strategy. And you could also say it was either a clear focus on the three areas that we have as technology that we had to develop. Solar integration, bidirectional charging capability, so our onboard charger is a dual charge unit really back in two areas, and integrated car sharing. For these three things, we invested a lot of time and money and also received patents and have a clear position in the industry. For the rest, we are extremely humble and capital-minded and say that is pure arrogance for us to develop something ourselves when it's available on the market, and you'll be surprised. There are a lot of suppliers and even some OEMs who are happy about making some extra money and making things accessible for something good and making a profit.
So I think it's important to go back then to the technology that you did develop. And those chargers and control modules I think would be important. So the unique thing about your vehicle is, all right, you can charge off of solar and you have a controller that allows that. It's going then into the battery, into the high voltage. You can plug into your regular 110 volt if I'm here in the US, but
Yes.
of course it's different in Europe.
Yeah,
Or going into high voltage for direct current charging.
correct.
You can also plug this into another vehicle. So I can charge from vehicle to vehicle. And you have to have logic and controlling that can work with all of those systems independently.
Correct.
So you did develop that, correct?
And yes, and here's only half of the technology.
Right.
So this here is the solar part. If you so want these parts fit together like this here is our technology integrated in the car. Mm-hmm. And this is not too hot, why it's not straight.
Yep.
It actually, I don't know if you know, why do you think we show this in that with these curves?
Because it's near impossible to get a cell to curve without them cracking, breaking,
Thank
a
you,
lot
sir.
of other issues.
That's
Yeah.
that's the maximum curvature that we explore that's possible. We don't have to go that far on our car, but all our samples are basically, or most of our samples, in that way, so that we can show you also some flexibility and some buffer. And then how to get the power? Yes, this is an 8-channel maximum power point tracker control unit, an MCU that we developed. A normal one has 1 channel, and a normal one switches much slower than ours. So we didn't invent the maximum power point tracker, for sure not, but we modified it so it works for automotive use. That's for our Sion. This here is for our, let's say, bus technology or trailer technology, where you can integrate it already today, where buses already are driving since last year with that technology in.
A lot of people don't actually make this conscious decision, which you did here. You'll see how this scuff plate is even with the load floor. So if I'm trying to lift something into this vehicle, I can easily tip it and slide it in. Am I losing storage because of that? No, I'm not losing storage because of that. There's still a large storage bin. Okay. How's that helpful? If you were to leave that as a raised lip and my initial bin is sinking down, it causes a lot more damage on the vehicle and it's a lot harder to move things in and out. So you've made a conscious decision to make that a flat load floor. The rear seats do fold down, so of course you can have that big flat surface.
Yeah.
Now you've put in tie-down straps into the sides of the vehicle. That's nice. However, I would make one addition. You should have 1 or 2 of these loops here. Reason being, let's say I've put something in here that is oversized and it's sticking out 5 centimeters. I can't close the hood, the latch, the lift gate. Okay. I need to be able to tie it and pull it back. Just a bungee cord to hold it while I'm getting home. Otherwise, this is moving in the wind, partially open the whole drive home. I bring that up just because I was very upset when I noticed that there are some companies, some manufacturers that do that. None of them were US-based companies, and it has been an issue for me. So I would make that suggestion. Put a point.
Thank you. We'll take that into consideration. That
Well, then
close to serious production.
Yeah.
Yes.
You end up getting a liability issue. Someone says, well, if you've designed it to be traveling with it open, do I have to take the risk of I understand that there's a liability question, but it would be helpful for me. I would prefer it. All right. Let's go ahead and go inside. So car sharing. So what am I looking at here? Who's Julia and how is her total $10.50?
Julia Berger is the owner of the vehicle.
Okay.
And in this case, we know it's Julia because you or I are Julia and came with our smartphone.
Looks like I have a lot more hair than I have now.
You're good-looking Julia.
All right.
Yeah, yeah. And she just came into the car with her cell phone that recognized her and was able to open it. You don't need the key, which you also have in a car. But also, and Julia is not the owner of the car. Sorry, in this case, actually, she was taking the car with her app, booked the car, and she was allowed to take it from, let's say, 9:30 to 1. She drove it from 9:30 to 12. There was a charge of $10.50 because you, as the owner, let's assume you or I were the owner. So I'm the owner, Thomas. I decided to let her drive it, and my fee is per minute or per kilometer that I set up originally. And in that case, it was a certain amount per ride, let's say. Per 5 hours, I always went $10.50. Why $10.50? In this case, as an example, a one-time one. Because I know Sono Motors is taking a minimum of $5 for every ride because they're paying the extra insurance. So in this case, she would pay $10.50. $5 would go to Sono Motors. We pay $4.50 to the insurance that we have set up for all our Sions and car sharing. That's already working in Germany today. In average, we expect it's probably 30% only that we need. And then the owner, Thomas, makes about $5. Yeah, so my pricing is $20. It's still only $5 for insurance or something.
So everyone is in a different situation and everyone uses their car differently. I have 4 cars.
Yes.
I'm not sharing a single one of my cars, and I will
You have
not.
aluminum wheels. We learned
Yes. However, as you said, there are some people who live in cities, some people live in apartment blocks, and it's hard to get parking in a city. You could honestly have one vehicle owner for a building that has 10 to 12 units and then share your vehicle with those people in the city.
We actually have done that since 3 years. We're doing pilots in Munich, where we actually had a house that shared a Sion, and we had what we call a Quartierskonzept, a quarter, let's call it a bigger block. We also had a group of people in not a monastery, but a Catholic association. They also shared a vehicle. So we tried it with friends, families. We have not gone public yet with our vehicle, but the app can be used publicly.
So you're voluntarily giving up money as an automaker then, because you would want to sell cars to as many people as possible. So you would like every one of those people to buy a car, but we know that they don't. We know that there are people who have living situations that don't allow them to own a car. So your car is capable of being both. Someone could buy your vehicle, own it solely, use it solely, but someone can buy your vehicle and it's already set up for that type of sharing. Sharing the physical vehicle, sharing the power, you have that built into one model. Because again, there are no options here. This is all one model.
I have to admit to you, we are a totally untypical car maker. I give you 2 examples on the point of should a car maker enable car sharing? Because then, of course, hey, if everybody can car share a Porsche, I can always get it when I drive in front of the place to get my ice cream or something to show off what car I have. The 2 founders of us, our 2 CEOs, they do not own a single car. They do car sharing, one. Their vision is a world without fossil fuels. So you'll be shocked to know that actually our main goal is not to sell as many cars as possible, but actually to reduce the number of cars in the world. And we want to contribute with our car. So we integrate car sharing in the car so there's less need for cars standing around and being totally wasted. And we've been true to that since quite a time. We also have not made a big story about spare parts business. We've not made a big story about options, talking about that. You're in the business of knowing exactly how profitable options are for a car maker. But our decision is to go exactly the other way. But we do know it's not for 100% of the customers. That's why our car business is sort of, let's say, 1 to 1.5% segment share. But for the solar business, we want every car, every Ford, every Cadillac, every Mercedes you can get. We'd like to have solar on the future electric vehicles because it makes sense. Today, for me, solar feels like electric vehicle discussions 10 or 15 years ago. The price is right for solar, the technology is here, but not many people really understand it. So from my side, big thank you for explaining it.
Well, thank you. So whenever I try and speak with someone, even the customers that come to Munro,
Yeah.
and I used to be a salesman, and when I was a salesman, I would always tell people the downside first. The reason why I would do that, and it scared some of my managers when I would, there is no one answer that is right in all situations.
Yeah, I agree.
So you have to determine, given the negatives, whether the positives that you would perceive or you would receive outweigh those negatives. And for some people, the negative associated with it would never even be an issue for them.
Typically, I give you one. If you want to ride the cannonball every day, solar doesn't give you much.
Yeah.
If you ride to work every day, you should already today have a solar electric vehicle, and we in the industry fail to give you one.
Okay. All right, what is it with this?
Well, this
Hang
is...
on. We just said that there is one vehicle. There are no options.
Yes.
So what you see is what you will receive.
Yes.
And I'm getting that.
There's so many ways of answering it.
Okay.
Let me give you the straight story first. We actually have 3 founders, Laureen, Jona, who built actually their very first vehicle in 3 years, secretly in a garage, didn't tell their parents, didn't tell their friends. And then there's a third person, Navina, who founded the company with them. She lived in the same apartment as Laureen, one of them. And at some point, they admitted to her what they were doing. And she told them, guys, you have to go public with it. You have to tell the world. And that's how we get the first $1 million from crowdfunding to build our first serious prototypes. We built 2 of them in 2016, 17. And this was there from the very beginning. It was a cool design idea, but the original idea was also that this one filters out dirt. And it does. It filters out regular particles, but also fine particles, but it doesn't filter it out perfectly. That's why we added the standard particle filters in the car, but we still kept it in the concept because the air is flowing through. This is real organic material, and it keeps moisture. It does collect stuff, dirt, and it's one of the only things that after 2 years you should replace. So this is something that you can take out yourself as a consumer. It's on a wooden piece, glued on, and coming now to, you can only have one vehicle in one color. This is sort of your, how do you say, a flower vase, like the Volkswagen Beetle in our car. You can put anything in there. So if you want, you can put your different Cadillacs in 1 to 86 scale in there and glue them on. So this is an individualization option.
So when I see that, if you came to me and you wanted a supplier that can make your pillars, sure, I can get you in contact with suppliers for pillars. I can get you in contact with suppliers for IPs. Maybe these screens.
Can I cut this short?
One of the first
suppliers we got was next to the motor.
Okay.
Was actually the Moss. And it's coming from Scandinavia. And I don't know if you're into model trains, but this is used for model trains quite often. You see it on displays. It's dead material, but it's organic. And it's very soft, has a very nice feel to it. But it also loses and gains humidity. Yeah. So it makes sense after 2 years to exchange it. We have a supplier in Scandinavia.
Okay. So my normal criticism now is always going to be on the interiors. I've been an interior person. We have a lot of hard plastics. Mm-hmm. We have textures, in mold grain textures. Mm-hmm. This looks like a chopped, I don't know if that is
really recycled, yes.
Yeah, okay, so
yes, it is.
Here's the problem that I have. Yeah. Sometimes people will try and do this look. The look is fake because lots of times if you try and use a recycled material in a vehicle,
you get different components in there. You cannot guarantee the same color.
Exactly.
And so forth. Yeah.
You end up having inconsistent fiber size, inconsistent material size, and that can be a problem for any of your manufacturing equipment. So a lot of times, even though they try and give you a look of recycled, it's actually some sort of a fake applique because you can't actually get that.
In this case, it's a prototype. I actually don't know if it's a real recycled
Okay.
material or a model, but it is absolutely possible that on the recycling side, their colors added or their particles added melded first, and then again move to get a consistency regarding color and particle size.
You'll notice on my center armrest, this is not an opening lid. You can get a good view from the rear. There is actually storage underneath there, but on a fixed component. So you're eliminating the hinge, you're eliminating the mechanism, you're eliminating the latch, which for you is all a cost save, but you're still getting the benefit of having a storage bin.
Just wanted to put my cell phone in there, but I don't have it here. Thank you, very good. So we are sort of universal on having something that you don't have to have the exact size of a cell phone. Either a Smurf tablet or a very small cell phone should fit nicely here.
You have 3 different positions then for different sizes that will fit there. All right, I was working with a startup once who wanted his company's phone, because he had another company that made phones, to actually control the vehicle. And he wanted this from the rear seat, and he wanted to be able to plug his phone into the center console. And that's what I said to him. I said, well, how big is your phone? Well, it's this size. I'm like, okay, it's going to be 5 years until we can get your first vehicle out in the market. How big is your phone going to be in 5 years? So whenever I see a feature like this, I always go, oh, okay, it fits what you have today. Does it fit what you have tomorrow? But you do have a 3 position. So I will give you that one. Bezel, you'll see the bezel sits not sub-flush, but actually hinges, or not hinges, but sits over the trim panel. So we see an edge there. Whenever you see an edge, you have the possibility of seeing inconsistency, and that's carried over
or other items.
On the top of the A-pillar is the same way.
I actually have to say this one looks better than some competitor series production
looks better
vehicles
than
that go in
some
high volume,
competitors.
sir.
The issue when you have something like this is normally your edge conditions on any injection mold part, you're going to have parting lines, you're going to have flash, and I can see a little bit of that here. So it is preferable to have that sitting somewhat subflushed at the headliner, but sometimes in your tool draft angles, you really can't get it. You did a nice feature on the B pillar where we have a return, but it is actually a stylized edge on that return. So even though it sits proud, it still looks like it's trimmed out. So I do like that. My favorite thing about what we're looking at here is, even though this is a pre-series build, this is still a real vehicle. The interior components that you have are actually available. Some components are currently in production. They're off-the-shelf components. Some of them you've been able to make, so you at least have a plan of how you're going to make these parts. The body of your vehicle, you have had, as you said, 7 iterations of solar panels trying to get something that will fit. And I'm certain that you still have a lot of work to do in finishing that off so that we can hopefully get smooth panels. You only have one color. It's going to be basically a mold-in color vehicle, no paint. So that's giving you savings on your line there. But in saying it is a real vehicle, you've built several of them. So can you explain where we are at now with this vehicle?
Yeah, we grabbed this vehicle out of the small production line from our engineering team. My colleague, another CTO, also worked for Daimler and other car companies, gave us vehicle number 10 out of the stage of vehicle completion 3. That's our 4th iteration of our vehicles. The first one we call SVZ0, the ones our founders built in the garage. And we named them after satellites and planets in our solar system. So this is Neptune we brought to the US.
Okay. So in saying that, that's what I get excited about. I don't just want to drive and review someone's science experiment. It's nice when people experiment. It's nice when people push the envelope. But trying to bring that experiment and then building it into something that can be real, that can be purchased by people, I thank you for that. I thank you for bringing something that you've actually built nearly 40 of. It's easy to build one. It's harder to make a second one that is the same as the first. But to try and build 40, that at least shows that you have some capability to bring it forward. So thank you for that. So for the Neptune, of the Sion, from Sono Motors, Thank you very much, and thank you for watching Munro Live, and have a good day.